Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Omni Athlete. If you're here, it's because, like us, you believe that sport is a vehicle for elevating global consciousness. But you know that elevating global consciousness only matters if it actually helps you achieve a peak performance state, get in the zone, and compete at your highest level. We created this show to highlight the highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors to unveil for you the side of sports that most never see and rarely know exists. So today's guest is an athlete, author, entrepreneur, and mental conditioning coach who went from being offered scholarships to law school to moving across the country to live and serve at a homeless shelter in downtown Los Angeles, all because he refused to be comfortable. To call this man in touch with his authentic voice would be an understatement. He has repeatedly fought back the notion of caving into the standards society has attempted to impose on him, including a pivotal moment in time where he chose to shut out virtually every second of distraction in his life to learn and read for 12 plus hours every single day. The result, an opportunity to work with perhaps one of the greatest coaches in the history of sports, period, a mere 6 months later. He's built his mentorship and consulting company into $1 million brand, empowering thousands of athletes, coaches, and leaders who are committed to maximizing their potential as human beings. And as if that wasn't enough to satisfy his hunger to grow and cause others to learn, he's also managed to publish a staggering 6 books in less than 3 years. It's my pleasure to introduce to Omni Athlete, one of only 2 people ever that's been invited to work with the legendary UNC Women's soccer team on mental conditioning, Joshua Medcalf. Welcome to the show, Joshua.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were talking off camera a minute ago, and we're going to touch on a couple subjects that we were talking about, but something that comes to mind really quickly when you watch videos of you speak or reading your books, there is such a powerful focus on the language that you use when you're describing either what you're experiencing or when you're working with clients or when you're speaking, trying to help others see a different perspective. And so I'd love to know, where does that focus on language come from? Where did that develop? And what is the role of that in just experiencing the reality we experience?
I think the foundational piece is, the Bible. The Bible talks about there's power of life and death in the tongue. And if that's true, then the implications are pretty massive, I think, for our lives. And then, I've been exposed to a lot of different, philosophies and works and people. And I think it was probably at a Tony Robbins event, when he started talking about NLP and the power of language and things like that. And it all just kind of came back to that foundation that I had instilled in me as a young kid, and really just understanding that, words really do mean a lot. And, that one word might mean something to somebody and another word means something to somebody else. And so it's just so important that we actually operate with linguistic intentionality and that we don't just throw around words. I get frustrated because sometimes people say, well, we need to be positive. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that means. What do you mean by that? And, do you mean fluff? Do you mean soft? Do you mean, stuff like that? Or do you mean that we need to be encouraging and that we need to, be really joyful? Or, like, what do you actually mean? Like, words have power. There's a reason why comedians have realized this, that the difference between one word or another word can mean the difference between a set working and it not working, and the timing of it. And then as well, you look at marketing campaigns and, ones that work and ones that don't. Oftentimes it's using the most precise, beneficial word. And so I just think linguistic intentionality is really, really important. James Clear wrote an article the other day, and he talked about the difference between 2 letters that can mean the difference in about 80% of people following through or not following through on a commitment. Yeah. And that's, I can't versus I don't. And just those CA versus DO and the power that exists between the difference. When you say I can't, you lose a lot of your autonomy, you lose a lot of your internal will and power, and so then you're more likely to not follow through whenever you use words like and phrases like I can't. Whereas if you say I don't, you feel really empowered. And the truth is, whether you feel that or not, like that's just what's happening internally, and the likelihood of you following through on that statement, on that idea is much, much greater. And so there's just so much power there. And it's missed on a lot of people. But anytime you look at billion-dollar industries, it's not missed on them. They understand the power of those words, and that one letter or two letters can mean the difference in a successful campaign, or one that they're not going to recoup their investment on.
Yeah. So with coaching, right? We've had the fortune to talk to a couple different Hall of Fame coaches, and I know you've worked with a spectrum of elite coaches. And one of the consistent themes that you've hit on and that we've seen is that when we think of peak performance for the human being, a huge part of that is making sure that your athletes know that you care about, and forget about your athletes, that the people you're standing across from, right, know that you love them and that you care about them first, and that the rest falls into place after that. And as we're talking about language, I wonder what kind of language needs to occur for coaches to make sure they're communicating that. Obviously, there's more than just words that have to go into that kind of energy, but language is huge to being able to communicate that level of love in an environment that is often loveless.
Yeah. I think it's probably a lot more, it starts at a level of heart posture. And it's really about, where is our heart posture? Because the other thing about communication is that it's, the cliche of 90% of communication is nonverbal. So it's not just the words that we're using. It's our heart posture behind it. It's our tone. It's our body language. But all of those things then are impacted by our heart posture. And people tend to feel our heart posture long before they actually are processing the words that we're using. And sometimes they're feeling our heart posture regardless of the words that we're using. We've all experienced that. And so yeah, I think that, at a foundational level, it's most of us need to experience pretty consistently a heart posture shift, because we live in a society that wants us to focus on putting secondary things first. And, things like money and winning and championships and stuff like that. And it's not that stuff doesn't matter. It's just that those are all secondary things.
Yeah.
And so, but if you are constantly in an environment, and our environment is way more a dictator and shaper of our choices than our willpower or, most other things in our life, if our environment is constantly trying to get us to, jerk our head over here and focus on the secondary things, then we've got to be really intentional in having people in place, and having books, and having things that are going to help us focus on putting first things first. And so that's where I think it all really starts, is at that heart posture level. Because otherwise, and we see this a lot, there's a lot of people that come to us, and they're really looking for, magic. They're really looking for that special sauce. They're looking for a quick fix, and it's not authentic. And so the funny part is that especially young people can see right through that shit, man. They see right through the smoke screen, and so they know whether you care or whether you don't care, and they know how much you care oftentimes, and where your priorities really lie. And so unless we have an authentic heart posture shift, there's just so many people that are looking for strategies, and really it's just a means to an end. And I think that if we actually have the right end in mind, which is, living a mission-driven life, which is really, creating influence and impact and things like that, and not lip service, because there's tons of people that give that stuff lip service. I want to write a book called The Purpose-Driven Lie, because it's, it has nothing to do with Rick Warren. I've had the opportunity to speak on Saddleback campus, and it's It's that there's a lot of people that code their heart posture in that language, but really their heart posture is in a radically different place, and you don't have to observe them for very long to know that that's most likely the case, to feel that that's most likely the case. And so it's not just about just words. It's not just about strategies. It's really about having an authentic heart posture shift. And that comes down to understanding that this life is short, this life is fragile, and accomplishments and winning and losing and achievements and setting goals and crushing goals and money and all that stuff is going to fade away on our deathbed, and none of it's really going to matter. And I just got off a coaching call, and it was the first call with this kid, and I told him, I'm like, look, this isn't theory to me, man. This isn't some philosophy. This is stuff that I've lived in the trenches, and I've put first things first, and I've watched my brand that I don't try and get work. I don't try and sell books. I don't try and get speaking engagements. They come to me. They come to us. We try and love people, serve people, provide value, answer the question of what we wish we would have had whenever we were, that age, or what do we wish our coaches would have had. We put first things first, and we do really, really well in terms of influence, impact, and money. But more importantly, whenever I was 9, man, my baby brother drowned, and I was the one that pulled him out of the pool. And then I lost 2 coaches to prison. And then my dad passed away whenever I was 23 from terminal cancer. And I've watched people live. I've watched people die. And I've watched my dad go from living in a trailer park to, becoming one of the most successful eye surgeons in Oklahoma. And then when he got diagnosed with terminal cancer, all that stuff didn't matter. And all the accomplishments, all the winning and losing, and it's just so much stuff doesn't really matter, and isn't going to matter in 5 years or 10 years, and definitely isn't going to matter on our deathbed. Yet it takes up the majority of our time and our focus and our energy. And so to me, this isn't this isn't a game. This isn't somebody's cool philosophy that I found. This is my life.
So the idea of first things first, right? That speaks to this notion that you guys talk about, the difference between feelings and principles, right? And having something on a foundational level that says, this is how I live, this is who I am, this is the mission that I don't need permission to act on, that I'm just going to choose to step forward with right now. What can athletes do to better? So if we talk about both a shift in heart posture that has to happen, but also a development of a belief system, right? That really has to change how they look at their life.
Yeah.
If they haven't had that level of adversity, right, where for better or worse, they are forced to have to develop it. What can they do to start shifting and making that shift?
Yeah. So I think that it comes down to that environment most of the time. And, then there's 6 really specific things that we call the fuel for our heart, meaning, what we read, what we watch, what we listen to, our self-talk, what we visualize, and our circle. Those 6 things in our environment are going to shape our heart posture, our beliefs, our actions more than almost anything else. And I believe that we were created just like a dream car, a Lamborghini, Ferrari, Range Rover. But if you put the wrong fuel into the gas tank of one of those, it's not going to work. It's going to break down, or you're going to get stuck. And I think that we're the same way. We put the wrong fuel into the gas tank of our heart, and we're going to break down. We're going to get stuck. And we're going to get really frustrated, because just like that car, we know that we were designed, for a purpose, and meticulously for a purpose. And so, but if we put the wrong fuel in there, we're going to break down. We're going to get really, really frustrated, because we know we were created for so much more. And so I think that the way that we start really impacting our heart posture and our beliefs and getting our focus back in beneficial directions is through becoming really intentional about the stuff that we're fueling our heart with. Because if we're not careful, a lot of the music that we listen to, a lot of the movies that we watch, a lot of the TV shows that we watch, a lot of the people that are in our circle, and just to be clear, our circle includes the TV shows that we watch and the movies that we watch and what we listen to. It doesn't have to be the people around us. You talked about how at that one point in my life, I was reading and studying like I was in medical school, and the people in my circle, I always joked, were, Steve Jobs and Oprah and Condoleezza Rice and, Nelson Mandela and, Mother Teresa and Jesus. And like those were the people that were in my circle at that time. And so, it's creating that environment. It's being really intentional about creating that environment that's going to help us grow, that's going to help us become more the type of person that's relentlessly pursuing what sets our soul on fire versus chasing some goal, some arbitrary outcome-based goal of winning some championship. Like, it's like, I love sports, don't get me wrong, but I start off almost every sports keynote to a program with, your sport is stupid, right? You chase a little ball around a field, you chase a little ball around a court. Like, come on, man. Like, this is real. This determines how we treat people. This determines how, we live our life. Like, and again, I love it. I love, one of my favorite things to do is to golf and snowboard. Like I have that runs through my veins. I don't want to say that I'm an athlete because I don't want my identity to be that, but like that sports are one of the things that give me the most joy in life. But if we allow that, and I'm just as guilty of it at times as other people, if we allow that to take over our life, then it's like, what are we talking about, man? It just doesn't make any sense that, and you don't have to look that far. Kobe Bryant, when are you going to retire? Well, if I get six, once I get six, come on, man. Wait, the first five didn't do it. What do you think what do you think that last one's going to do? That last one, it's not going to do anything. It's a lie. We're constantly chasing this. Well, once I get there, then I'll finally, then that will fulfill me. That will be the thing that will fulfill me. Or once I get that thing, or once I get that relationship, and then we get there and eventually we're right back in the same place. And so then we go through the same process again. And it's like, well, maybe it's on the other side of that thing. And, I was just at one of the most prestigious schools in the country. And I was talking with these kids, and I was like, there was a time in your life when you said, if I could just get to that school, then everything would be amazing in my life. It would be the most incredible thing ever if I could just get here. And I used really direct, colorful language to say, you are miserable. So what happened? Because you thought that it would get here. And now you think that if you win a national championship, something's going to change. And it's going to be the exact same thing. And again, like I've worked with people that have won, world championships and gold medals, and it doesn't do it. It cannot. We're like, and I think it's in Chop Wood, Carry Water, where we talk about, we're like thirsty people, that are guzzling salt water, expecting that to somehow, quench our thirst. It can't. It inherently can't. But that's what we're trying to fill it up with. It doesn't work.
So there's, as I think about identity, right, with athletes, one of the things that comes to mind, I know for me, because I identified as an athlete for so long, right, both in football and then martial arts. I've trained in martial arts since I was practically 4 years old, right? And so I think what I found is that there was a lot of fear around separating what I do from my identity, right? And really taking the time to say, okay, if I have to sit with myself and really say, this is what I care about, these are the things that should be first, what does that mean for this thing that I do most of the time? And, I wonder what it seems like that's such a hurdle for young athletes, especially, to be able to step through at times.
Absolutely. One of my favorite books, which we kind of wrote a fable that incorporated a little bit, is called The Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. And in that book, the author had spent some time mentoring some kids at Duke. And I went to Duke for a year and a half and worked on my master's there. And so that was kind of, interesting to me. And he asked these kids, he asked them to do a really simple exercise. The Duke Chapel is in the middle of the campus, and he asked them, he said, over the next 2 weeks, I want you to stop at some point during your day in the chapel, and I just want you to sit in the chapel for 5 minutes completely silent. Wow. And And after 2 weeks, none of them had done it. And I think it went on for like a month. And none of these, I think there was only 6 or 7 kids that he was working with, but not one of them had done it. And they were asking themselves, one day they were like, why haven't we done this? And one of the girls kind of owned it. And she said, I don't know about you guys, but I'm afraid that if I stop and I really just sit, that I might wonder if I'm actually wasting my life. And wonder what I'm actually doing with my life. And I think that we're really bad about trying to find stuff to keep ourselves busy from actually having to contemplate the really hard questions in life. I think there's a reason why the Bible talks about be still and know that I am God. And it's like, be still. How many people do you know that are actually still? And in martial arts, it's definitely incorporated in there. And there are some, different sects in life that that create space for that. But for the most part, we cram our days to where we have no margin. When we do have margin, we consume the endorphin releasing beast that is our phone and social media and technology, or or watching videos or watching movies, or we're just constantly having noise all around us that distracts us from having to wrestle with the peace and quiet. And in the peace and quiet, that's oftentimes where those questions start popping up of, what am I really doing with my life? Does this really matter? And am I putting first things first? It's a lot easier to just believe a false narrative that I'm an athlete, that I'm a football player, that I'm a coach, that I'm a this, that I'm a that, and then allow slowly that to just wrap around our neck, and to the point where we're starting to make decisions that make no freaking sense, but we believe that we're a football player. We believe that ball is life. We believe that coaching is life, and we believe that our coaching mission is life. So all of a sudden, there's this huge trail of tears behind us, and that's our wife and our kids and our family, and we're like, oh, but I thought, and it's like, man, don't become a transformational leader on the road to actually realize that at home, like your home, the thing that's your priorities are falling apart. Now, I will say with one caveat, because see, the interesting thing is, like, I don't try and tell people what their priorities should be. I ask them what their priorities are, and then I ask them to show me what they do with their time. And then I'll tell them what their priorities are. And they don't like that, but that's the truth, because we spend our time and our money on what we actually value. And in my life, I have been fairly clear with almost every person that I have dated that it goes God, mission. And that is, like, you have to understand that right now in my life, this is where I'm at with my priorities, and you don't come above the mission. And that's, that's my priorities. But when people tell me, it's God, family, whatever, like, and then they're, the thing that they spend the most time on is fourth. It's like, no, sorry. It's not the case. And so, yeah. And again, a lot of this stuff, I want to be clear, it's easy to talk about this stuff. This stuff is really hard. We live in a world that has a vested interest in us not living this stuff out. Every commercial that we watch, everything in our environment tends to point us towards happiness, because happiness is an unfulfillable desire. It's an unquenchable desire that's me focused and easy. And you talk about linguistic intentionality. What we really want and need is fulfillment. And some people say, oh, well, you're just using semantics. And it's like, no, these words actually mean radically different things. Happiness is easy and me-focused. Fulfillment is others-focused and hard. And so if I'm chasing one, I'm often going to miss out on the other. And what do I really want to miss out on? Well, it's not fulfillment. So it's like, for my birthday last week, I spoke 14 times in 6 days in some of the toughest environments around, doing this pro bono speaking tour where kids don't want to hear what I have to say, in gyms that don't have good acoustics, that, you know, that where people are treating me like crap whenever I can get 20 grand to speak for, you know, 30 minutes to some of the biggest corporations in the world. And here I am in a middle school or a high school with teachers and principals treating me like I'm some peasant. And yet that's what I'm doing on my birthday, instead of going to the Bahamas or the Maldives or anywhere that I want to go. And because I know that even though this is going to be way harder and it's not necessarily what I want to do, it's going to give me more fulfillment than going and doing this other stuff that is me focused, easy, and is going to create short-term happiness, but it's a never-ending pit. And that's why corporations and multi-trillion-dollar industries sell us happiness. They never sell us fulfillment, because then they wouldn't get our money anymore.
Coaching is such a catch-22, right? And what you're saying right there, I find really fascinating, right? So as a coach, right, my job is to empower my athletes. If I see them as just athletes, it's my job to get them to do something that my, you know, livelihood is on the stake for, right? So control becomes this really natural focus for me. And even when as a coach, I don't want to admit it, the thing that I'm focused on more often than not is control. But to let authentic performance happen, to let a person step into that place when they are performing that's truly just them, loving it for the pure joy of the performance itself, I have to let go of control, right? I have to give them that space to say, hey, what is it that you really want as a person? What is it that truly fulfills you? What is it? How do you have to shift to get your heart posture to a place where it is authentic? And it's just such a challenge to relinquish that control, right? Because we're so programmed to want it.
Yes, I think that we're programmed to want it, but I also think that, you know, we're in environments that are telling us that that's what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we get outside of that, as soon as we seek out places. So sometimes people are like, well, so what am I supposed to do? Go spend time with people that are dying. Like, there's people dying everywhere. Like, there's hospitals, there's people on the street that are dying. Like, when you start to see that, whenever you get outside of that, when you go to, some countries that are incredibly impoverished, like it starts to be a really big reality check. And, I wouldn't wish what I've been through in my life upon anyone. But simultaneously, when people say, well, what would you change in your life? I'm like, well, I wouldn't change anything, because I couldn't have become the person that I've become had I not gone through that stuff. And has it been, junior high and middle school and high school were some of the worst years of my life. And college, quite frankly, kind of sucked as well. So, but in order to become the person that I become, that's somewhat, I believe, the alienation and, isolation that I had to go through, to where now they say that in order to change the world, you have to be socially disagreeable. But to become socially disagreeable, do you know what you have to go through to where you're able to act in spite of what other people might think about you? That is such a hard place to operate from. But if you've been through hell and back, it's kind of like, you know what? People never really liked me anyway, so I'm going to speak the truth. And I'm just going to be authentic, because I already know that I can make it without them. And so why would I start compromising now? But yeah, I think that so much of that comes from, those near death experiences, or those, I think most of the time it's near death experiences, whether that means that you had a near death experience or you are near death, that those things tend to radically reshift our priorities and our heart posture, because it's just like, oh man, yeah, this really doesn't matter. So like when I do corporate work, or I do, work with coaches, that's one of the first exercises I have them do is, write out your obituary. And people are like, oh God. And, we talk about positive. That's one of the greatest examples of in the beginning when we were off film. I told you that I'm not a positive coach or a positive person. Well, when you start telling people to write out their obituary, you're definitely not falling into that positive category and make people feel all warm and fuzzy. Like that freaks a lot of people out. But death is a guarantee for all of us. So why do we spend so much time trying to avoid it instead of learning from it and embracing it? And then I think we might actually be able to live more fully if we did that instead of running from it.
Positivity has this really interesting connotation, right? When we hear it, I think there's a natural, to the outsider, if you're not in the sports community, there's this belief that positivity has some innate power that it can unlock, right? That it can allow us to say, hey, the world is great. I'm just going to step into this abstract feeling of gratitude, and my world is beautiful, and now I can just go do what I need to do, right? And it's not that simple. It never is. And it's not about just a objective or a subjective thought, right? It's about truly being able to say, hey, this is what has to happen for me to move forward. And I wonder, as I'm thinking about this, Joshua, the growth mindset is another place where I feel like it's very easy to look at athletes and say, hey, that person has a growth mindset just because they're a high performer, right? When in reality, that person's life, it feels like to them, is on the line every time they take a shot. And we have these terms that really make their way through popular culture that don't truly represent what's actually occurring on the other side.
I couldn't agree with you more. I realized whenever I read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, that I had a fixed mindset predominantly throughout my life. However, had you looked at it from the outside, and even I could attest, I used growth strategies and I used growth mindset strategies, but really at the foundational level, at my heart posture, it was to prove myself. And so yes, absolutely. I think that takes place all over.
What we're really interested in big challenges, right? And in shifting what feels like just a cultural position on what it means to be an athlete, right? And I wonder, from your perspective, what is the biggest shift that has to occur, right? And I think more specifically, because that's just a giant question, what we've been talking about a lot is how do we allow and empower coaches to relinquish that control and encourage their athletes to step into an authentic place, and then how do we celebrate those athletes for making that decision that may mean I step away from sport, right? It may mean that the choice I come to is that this isn't what I should be doing anyway. What do we do?
That's the $1 million question.
Isn't it, right?
And one of my favorite things to do whenever I go in and I work with, especially a Division I, program, is there's always one or two kids that I'll say, well, you should quit. And they're like, I can't quit. I'm like, who says quit? And even just them getting to that place of owning that they could quit, it goes back to I can't versus I don't. Like, then it's I don't quit, I don't want to quit, versus I can't quit. Well, even that alone is going to create a heart posture shift. And so to me, it's the ironic part again of putting first things first. So you've got these people in coaching that are so desperately trying to control stuff that's outside of their control. Ironically, while not typically focusing on stuff that is 100% inside of their control, which the people around them all see, all the stuff that they're actually modeling, not what they're talking about, but what they're modeling. And so they're trying to control all this stuff. Whereas if they would actually just surrender the stuff that's outside of their control and focus on the stuff that's inside of their control, the likelihood of them getting more of what they want is so much greater. I mean, I'll read the excerpt from Chop Wood about surrender, because I think
Please.
this is where I summed it up best. So, and this is the story. It's a fable of a young boy who wants to become a samurai archer. And so it's kind of his relationship with his sensei. And John nodded as he took in the sunset. Akira thought for a minute, then said, John, I want to share with you the most important piece of wisdom my sensei ever shared with me. The ultimate illusion of the human experience is control. The person you want beside you in battle is the guy who has surrendered the outcome and surrendered to the fact that he might die. When you surrender the outcome, you are freed up to be at your best, to be in the moment, and to trust your training. It is the one who has surrendered the outcome who ironically has the greatest chance of survival. It is the one who has surrendered the outcome who has the greatest chance of success. It is the one who has surrendered to the fact that he could fail who has the greatest likelihood of not failing. Until you surrender the outcome, you will always be the greatest enemy to your own success. In order to reach your greatest potential, you must operate with a heart posture of gratitude, commit to the controllables, surrender the outcome, and trust the process. Surrendering the outcome doesn't mean you care less about the outcome or your process. It doesn't mean you don't give your very best. It simply means that you have surrendered the outcomes that are outside of your control. Many mornings, I pray and surrender the things that I desperately want to control, but know I don't have control over. Surrendering the outcome is about having peace with that which is outside of our control without sacrificing the effort or care of what is inside of our control. And so I think the crazy part about that is the more that we try and control the people that we're leading, the more that's where our energy is going. So we're not focused on what we do have control over. And then that leads us to the situation where I'm working with this Division I program, and I don't believe in using fitness as a punishment.
Right.
Why would we psychologically condition something that's so valuable as a negative, as a punishment? Doesn't make sense if you really think about it. And so I've explained that. The next day I'm observing practice, and coach storms over to me, all right, so what am I supposed to do? I had 4 kids who showed up with their shirts untucked, and you say that, I'm not supposed to use fitness as a punishment. So what am I supposed to do? And, I kind of got a little bit quiet, and it was such an awkward moment, but this is such a good example of his focus was on them and all that stuff outside of his control and controlling them. And I said, man, I don't mean to be disrespectful or rude, but can you do me a favor? Can you look at you and your entire coaching staff? And every single one of them had their shirts untucked. And I said, why don't we just start there? Why don't you guys just tuck your shirts in? Because obviously you care a lot about that. And, the person in coaching turned and walked away. But the ironic part is, how many times did that happen? How many times did those kids run wind sprints for not having their shirt tucked in while the coaches didn't have their shirts tucked in? That wasn't the first time that situation happened. And the irony was not lost on those kids. It never is. And so, but that's what I think happens when we're trying to control everybody else. Then we often don't put first things first. We don't, do the stuff that's actually under our control, and we end up messing it up. We see it all the time in games. Whenever somebody's trying to over control something, you see it all the time in relationships. It tends to be on both sides of the equation. The person that gets the girl or the guy is not usually the one that is obsessive about it and trying to control it. It's the person that's kind of nonchalant about it and is just like, yeah, whatever. And that was so hard for me. And and the funny part is with all of this stuff, all this stuff that I, share is stuff that are huge struggles for me. There is nothing that I teach that comes natural to me other than maybe work ethic. That's the one thing that just grinding, I've always kind of been a little bit of a grinder, but everything else is so hard for me. That's why I don't ever talk about competing. Sometimes people in coaching come to me and they're like, well, we need to talk about, really competing. And I'm like, competing? I'll compete over a French fry contest. That is the most inherent thing to me around. But true mental toughness of having a great attitude, giving your very, very best, treating people really, really well, having unconditional gratitude, regardless of your circumstances, that is the hardest thing in the world for me. I mean, yesterday at Torrey Pines, I told a couple as we were walking off that had played in front of us, and we played in 5 hours and 30 minutes. I said, please don't ever come back to our golf course. And the guy turned around and said, excuse me? And I said, please don't ever come back to our golf course. That was the most ridiculous round of golf I've ever seen. Please don't ever come back. And he started cussing me out. And I mean, and the truth is that may have been me exhibiting true mental toughness, but like, this is hard. Like I wanted, you know, all this stuff is so hard for me. And none of it comes easy or natural. This is all stuff that is so counter to our, you know, our training or our genes, or just what we, you know, the way that we learn growing up.
You know, we had this perspective in martial arts, right? As a both a student as an instructor too, you learn that I don't have to be a black belt to teach a white belt, right? You know, I can be, you know, 6 months, a year ahead, and still have value to offer somebody. And I think maybe as I listen to you and as I think about the components that you guys spell out to what it takes to be a transformational leader, maybe that's the superpower of a transformational leader, right? Is not a belief that I have to do something or achieve something before I can share what it is that I'm trying to do and what it is that I'm trying to work through, to grow through, the obstacles I'm trying to overcome. And it's so hard to get out of our own way and just be honest about, yeah, I think this is what we should do, but it's hard for me too.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most interesting things about what you just said is that we don't even have to be ahead of somebody to add value. I honestly think if I look at my life, and I know that I'm, you know, wired differently than other people, and I'm a very unique human being. Don't get me wrong. But the people who have added the most value in my life typically are not that smart, are not brilliant, are not, you know, the best in the world at what they do. They love me.
Wow. Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing about love. Like, we get love so messed up in our culture. They don't love me to get anything out of me. They don't love me because I love them back. They just love me. And that type of, you talk about surrendering, that's surrendering the outcome of, like, it's not, because what we call love most of the time is manipulation.
Conditional, right?
Yeah, it's conditional, but it's even more than condition. It's manipulation. It's love to get something out of somebody. And so the people who have had the biggest impact on my life by far are people who have loved me and been present in my life. And those are all things that anybody can do. Now, it may take some learning, but honestly, I think oftentimes it takes unlearning. Because I do think that children get this more than other people. Now, are children inherently selfish? Yes, absolutely. But they also do have more of that pure love that is like, so I think some of it is, it's an unlearning process of a lot of the, you know, manipulation that we have learned to try and get the things that we want, because then all life becomes is us trying to manipulate one thing after another to get the outcomes that we want. And even a lot of the people listening to this podcast, probably part of the reason why they listen to the podcast is trying to figure out new strategies to manipulate different things in life to get what they want. And the truth is, we don't even know what we want. Like we're the worst. We have no clue what we want, you know, from the food that we eat that was like, man, I want this so bad. And then we eat it and then we feel like shit. And then we're like, oh God, why did I do that? Why did I drink that? And then, you know, to the championships and stuff like that. We think that we want it and we think that it's so important, and then we get it. And then it's like, oh, that just didn't do what I want. Or, well, maybe it's the, you know, now I have to prove that it wasn't a fluke that I won a national championship. Well, now I need to win. Now I need.
It's this brutal cycle, right?
It is.
It's This is incredible, Joshua. Before I ask my last question, and I hate that we're running up against time here. Where can these guys go to find you online?
I'm pretty easy to find online. I think if you just Google Joshua Medcalf or Train to be Clutch, you could find it. But it just depends on what you want. If you want books, if that's your thing, we've obviously written 6 of those, and we also have a training manual that's out there. And Jamie has another book that he's written called The Principal Circle. And so there's plenty of books that you could find on Amazon if you want to listen to books. It's Audible. If you like social media, you can find me at Joshua Medcalf on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. Instagram is more where I share stuff from more of my personal life and things like that. Our website has a ton of free tools and things that you can download. I get people all the time who ask me about books that they should read and things like that. We've put together a reading challenge for the last 4 years that we keep adding books to. I don't know how many it has now. I think it's like 65. It could be 70. I don't know. But we try and keep them in order of importance to us and for other people. And so you could go through that reading challenge if you want. And then there's even an opportunity to, if you stick with the challenge, to ask me 2 questions that I'll answer really faithfully every 2 weeks. And so that's available on our website. But yeah, I'm pretty easily findable online.
It's awesome. So this show is called The Omni Athlete, and the idea that sparked Omni Athlete was to understand what it takes to truly be a mind, body, and spirit competitor. And our final question is, what does it mean to you to be an Omni Athlete?
To me, I think that would mean understanding that, that God unconditionally loves us to the point that he, sent his son to die for us, and that every single human being on earth has infinite worth. And I think if we can understand that, and that our value comes from who we are and not from what we do, then I think that frees us up to then be able to go and do and perform and do all of this stuff as a human being, instead of, if we don't get that, we become a human doing. And so to me, being an Omni Athlete would understanding where our value really comes from and who we really are, and then just being freed up to, as I mentioned earlier, be relentless in the pursuit of what sets our soul on fire, regardless of outcomes. And that's what I would say.
Awesome. Joshua, thank you for being on the show. This has been absolutely incredible. And guys, when you go into Joshua's world and what he, Jamie, their entire team are doing with Train to be Clutch, recognize, number one, that they are constantly learning. And one of the things you're hit with first and foremost when you interact with any of these guys online or in person or via Skype, Zoom, whatever it may be, is that they are genuinely committed to the process of learning and learning how to be more and more authentic. And if there's anything it takes to be an Omni Athlete, we're learning there is no better quality than the belief in process, the belief in learning, and a love for yourself that starts truly with who you are to the core of your being. Joshua and his entire team exemplify that. So I highly recommend it. Dive into their world. And until next time.
Thanks so much for having me, Josh. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed our time.